The coefficient of restitution is a ratio of the velocity of some object after it bounces to the velocity before it collides with a very hard surface. Typically, this is actually measured by the height that something bounces versus the height that it is dropped from. Typical coefficients of restitution for a golf ball are in the order of 0.78, for a basketball about 0.8 to 0.85. This depends, of course, on how much air is inside the ball. And some other objects are given here. This is a diagram that shows the first bounce and several other bounces, and we can see that the takeoff velocity determines the height that the ball bounces and how long it stays in the air. And the same is true for the subsequent bounces afterwards. So after the first bounce, the ball is back at y equals 0, a height of 0, and a time t sub a has elapsed. And from this we can see that the takeoff velocity is equal to 1/2 acceleration of gravity times the length of time until the next bounce. At the second bounce, we notice that the incoming velocity is the takeoff velocity at the beginning of the first bounce. And the second bounce now progresses and has the same mathematical arguments as the first bounce. So after the second bounce, the takeoff velocity is again 1/2 acceleration of gravity times the time until the third bounce. And so this gives us that the ratio of the two velocities, the takeoff velocity at the second bounce and the landing velocity just before the second bounce, that ratio is the same as the ratio of times between the two bounces. Using a mobile app called AudioTime Plus, we can measure those two times intervals very, very accurately. Here we see the screen recording of the first 3 bounces of the ball in the AudioTime Plus app. You can clearly see that there are 3 sounds, and we can use the buttons on the bottom to find when the first sound occurs and when the second sound occurs. The app also finds the interval between the first and second sounds. We can then do that again for the second and third sounds to get TB, the time between the second bounce and the third bounce. The 2 times given by the app are shown here, and the ratio gives us the coefficient of restitution as approximately 0.854. This compares favorably with a value by measuring height and height of the first bounce, which is a lot less accurate because it's difficult to measure accurately how high the second bounce is.